My research is focused around Punjabi literature and specifically the Punjabi movement. The Punjabi movement began around the 60s and the 70s when there was a critical group of intellectuals, most of whom were associated with the left wing and Marxist politics, who began to look at the question of Punjabi. And it's interesting because while Punjab is the dominant region in the country, Punjabi is not the dominant language. Urdu became part of the national project and the project of national identity from very early on. And even before that, during the colonial period, it was wrapped very closely with bureaucratic function, because of which obviously Urdu became a language of power. And most of the Punjabis and the Punjabi elite specifically took to Urdu for that reason. What I'm looking at is the literature specifically around the movement, and that's what I began with. And I was interested in how Punjabis are viewing their past. How are they engaging with questions of Punjabi identity? And there have been some really interesting findings. For some people, Punjab sacrificed its identity for the sake of Pakistan. For others, Punjab actually should not adopt any such identity to avoid taking this very hegemonic role within Pakistani politics. And Punjab's identity would be identityless in a way. So they're going to cite people like the 18th century poet Bulle Shah, who said, "Ki jana mein kaun." So the true identity is to be a kaun, right? A nobody, as the word goes. Recently, I've also been developing that work into looking at the contemporary context. So looking at what transformations have taken place in that milieu from the 60s and the 70s. And again, that's a very interesting process because now that we have this whole discourse of transnational human rights and the UN actually recognizing the right to a mother language, it has completely changed again, right? So now the discourse around the Punjabi movement has become very rights oriented, and there is a lot of kind of activity around it. Organizations are getting involved, and from this kind of literary sphere, it's turning into a more activist circle in which people are concerned with engaging with the state and not just trying to change the situation of Punjabi through their writing and through their literature. The course I'm going to be teaching at LUMS is with the Gurmani Center, and that's where I work. And it is an introduction to Punjabi literature. I'm really excited about the course, and I've been contacted by a few students as well already, even though it's months from the semester, who are full of questions about the course. And I think that's probably because, I was a student at LUMS myself, and we never had a Punjabi literature course or any course in any of the regional languages. But that started changing a lot. The Gurmani Center now also offers courses in Sindhi and Pashto. And it's a really important move because we need to look at all of these regional languages to actually understand the connections between them, right? So Sindhi and Punjabi have a very long historic connection. Urdu and Punjabi then also develop that connection, right? So if we want to appreciate all of the motifs of even Urdu literature, we have to look at where they came from, right? So a lot of it is borrowed from, the much older tradition of Punjabi. The course, because it's introductory, looks at, it's titled From Farid to Farid. So it starts with Baba Farid, who's the 13th century Punjabi poet, and he's reckoned as the kind of first important figure. His poetry is also featured in the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the Sikh holy scriptures. And that also tells us a lot actually about how this whole heritage and this literary tradition is cross-religious, how it spans different religious communities. And the Sikh community and the Muslim community in Punjab didn't historically see itself as distinct, as divided as it does today, as it has increasingly post 1947. So from Baba Farid, the course takes us through all the sort of key poets of the Punjabi tradition, sort of the canon as we define it. So it goes from Baba Farid through to Waris Shah, Bulle Shah, Shah Hussain, covering a lot of these kind of literary giants, and it ends with Ghulam Farid. Khwaja Ghulam Farid, who is a 20th century poet, and a lot has changed by now because the British are in power now. And so I've been trained as a historian, so I am interested in literature, but my interest remains very interdisciplinary. I will use, I combine both kind of disciplines to do what I do, and charting that kind of trajectory and looking at the social transformations and the political changes which are kind of informing these works from the 13th century to the 20th century in Punjab itself also gives us a very different perspective of Punjab, because most of the other histories that have been written are always from the perspective of the ruler, right? So it's always the Mughal perspective, or it's always the British perspective. But this gives us a perspective of the people because we're getting it through oral literature. And in the course as well, what I've tried to do is try to get students to engage with the culture and the performance and the music as well that goes along with this poetry. Since it is an oral tradition, and since shrines have been the place where it has been sung and preserved, right? Not through any kind of state-sponsored written activity. We need to kind of experience those spaces and experience the different facets of that tradition, right? Which is musical, because there's a lot of, qawwali singing all owes itself to that poetry. And there's a theatre tradition as well, and there are local words for it, naat, sang, all of which we're going to be looking at. And I hope it's going to be an interesting course and students come to share my enthusiasm for my subject.